Okay, great. Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity, Joanne and Shelley, from being able to present to you today about Natural Resources Conservation Service. We're one of 16 agencies with the U.S. Department of Agriculture, commonly known as NRCS. Agencies, we always speak in acronyms. So our mission is to help people help the land. And what we do is we work under our guiding principles to work closely with land users to develop plans. We jointly work with the landowner to address their objectives, their needs, and the resource concerns. Our planners, we have a variety of different planners. We have range technicians, soil conservationists, biologists, engineers, and we all work together to put together a plan that adequately addresses the landowner's concerns. Our agency prioritizes projects that benefit wildlife. We have a set amount of money put aside to that. We have a variety of funds for that, and I'll talk to you about it. Unfortunately, with probably lobbying of somebody on the phone, 10% of our EQIP funding is supposed to go towards wildlife. All of these species you've seen on here all have dedicated fund pools for projects that directly benefit them. So we're not competing against other folks who want to put in a fence or upgrade an irrigation system. So we go way back to Hugh Hammond Bennett, who was our founder. He was a soil scientist, and those sometimes when I become frustrated that it's taken me a couple of years to get something through, it took him over 20 years to get the Soil Erosion Service together. And for over 60 years, the primary focus of the Soil Conservation Service was maintaining soils and also improving water quality. In 1994, we expanded out to address additional resource concerns: soil, water, air, plants, and animals. We've moved into energy. We've moved into a couple of other resource concerns. But one of the key things about our agency, and it's a pleasure to follow up with all the research that's gone on, Congress does not give us money to do research. We do have some grant funding program that allows us to enter into an agreements. And we've done that with several on the phone. We can talk about it. We've done it with Wild Farm Alliance and also with Sarah Cross and we've done it with UC Berkeley, a number of the universities, to actually learn a little bit better, take more of the newer trends in science and to incorporate those into our documents so that our planners and our biologists can do better planning. So what is NRCS? So we work with farmers, ranchers, and non-industrial landowners who voluntarily request our technical assistance. And then typically that leads to some type of competition for financial assistance through a variety of our conservation programs. The Farm Bill, which comes about typically every 5 years, funds us, as well as through our Farm Bill and also through our own policy. We have a terrific privacy wall. So anytime I talk with a farmer or a rancher, we cannot discuss that with anyone else unless we have written permission to do so. We cannot report on anything that's done unlawfully on that property unless it's in violation of one of our Farm Bill laws or principle. And so it gives a landowner a great opportunity to come in and ask us any question they want. And we assist them with that. So it allows for really terrific open communication and actually a much more trusting access to private lands. In terms of our partnerships, our key partners are the conservation districts. We also work very closely with other federal agencies, state agencies, county, and as well as tribes. So technical assistance, free technical assistance is available upon request, but I have to say with everything that's going on with COVID and with just the availability of personnel in our state, the last couple of years have been kind of, we're really short people. So if you're trying to request assistance, be patient with us. And I meant to mention this. I noticed that there are a number of people from around the country. NRCS is in every state. NRCS has field offices in most counties. So if you're in another state, you can contact the field offices in your respective states. But what happens is these landowners will come to us for this free technical assistance, and then we will work with you. If it happens that the project ends up getting funded, then what will happen is the cooperators apply and compete for the funding assistance, and that comes in a form of reimbursement. once the cooperators have actually installed the projects as agreed upon and signed off on our implementation requirements. Occasionally, we'll be involved in permitting. We always have to follow the Endangered Species Act. We have to follow, the State Historic Preservation Act and a national law on cultural resources. But we will assist planners and other organizations in getting other permits. This is just a diagrammatic of the planning process that we have. The first step is just basically collecting resource information, finding out what the client's needs, objectives are, finding out what's actually out there, what's really the resource concern, what's the symptom of it. Then we put together, we've got a lot of different tools in our toolbox. We say, what is the best practice? What are our different alternative practices? We promote that to the cooperator. We jointly make the decision. They decide on a suite of practices. And then after that, we draw up specifications and requirement sheets for them to do that. And then it's up to them to implement it. Okay. So we've had dedicated funding for a number of different birds. So the first two there, the Sage Grouse Initiative and the Southwestern Willow Flycatcher, these are national initiatives. The Sage Grouse Initiative was to target how we could assist ranchers to better manage their lands for the benefit of sage grouse across the 11 Western states. This is a species that was petitioned several times to be listed, and through great cooperation with ranchers, and we've enhanced the habitat and precluded the need to actually list the species. Southwestern Willow Flycatcher is across 6 different states. That focus is primarily in the riparian areas, and now we've expanded that out to more of a Southwest riparian initiative. We do work on water birds, on rice, as to how to better manage the flooding and the dewatering of these fields, so we can provide habitat for shorebirds and different water birds. We have a tricolored blackbirder of funding dedicated towards delaying harvest of silage. Tricolored blackbirds, about 80 to 90% of the birds are nesting in silage, and there's a conflict of when they've actually fledged and when the dairy operators need to cut. So we get people to voluntarily delay harvest. We pay them to do that. They do additional management practices. And essentially, through this cooperative effort between Audubon and California Department of Fish and Wildlife and NRCS, dairy operators, dairy organizations, the numbers of birds are finally increasing. And then we have a whole suite of other species that can get funded through our Declining Species Habitat Initiative, which, for those of you who are around when we used to have the Wildlife Habitat Incentives Program, it's kind of replaced that. So we do we have a whole bunch of different practices, and we call them practices that we can address the habitat elements that are limiting on these fields. And the previous speakers have talked about a lot of these different things. And this is kind of in the order of how we typically do this. Oftentimes, when I went back to school, I was very interested in what are wildlife management approaches, or what are management approaches that farmers can do to not only allow but encourage coexistence on farms. And so structures for wildlife, hedgerow planting, cover crop, wildlife habitat planting, conservation cover, and parent forest buffer are those that are most commonly done here in California. So just some examples: we have specifications where I take information for these practices. And this particular one, structures for wildlife, we have a whole suite of practices that are scenarios that we fund under that. And as the practice lead, I take research information, I distill that down to more simplified steps, drawings, management actions that keep these structures functioning. And then when I find or obtained updated information, I incorporate that into the specifications. For example, we got something from Sarah about different ways that we can put up perch poles, for example, on really rocky soils, a different way to attach these to posts. And these are really helpful for us. And so we're trying to do the same thing with Wild Farm Alliance in terms of encouraging more folks to provide habitat out there for birds. We took that one paper that Sarah posted, and we posted it as a technical note, because we're trying to get it out to our folks so that they're very aware of that and get this out to the public too. So here's an example of a number of planting practices, wildlife habitat plantings. This is a photograph of a project that I worked on with the Is Nrcs Society and UC UC Davis, we were trying out different mixes of plantings. This is a mix that some of these species we were putting more under ammons. This is a mix that would be in more in open settings, and this we would plant under upland wildlife or wildlife habitat plantings. This particular site is at our Plant Material Center at Lockford. Now, yes, great loamy soils there. Production's not going to be like this in some of your class 4 soils, but this was initially planted to attract insects and pollinators, but we're fairly certain that this is going to be a great benefit to birds that are going to prey on those insects. Another one is conservation cover. There's another planting practice also seeded in, but this particular practice has a number of other purposes and resource concerns that they are addressing. This one happens to be addressing soil erosion. And this is a practice that's been around for a long time and is an agronomic practice, but also I work on this particular practice. And this is actually the 3rd year of this planting, which is remarkable. This producer did a great job of addressing his competing vegetation at first and has done very little afterward. This other one here is cover crop. I know that Ames talked about this earlier and then he's doing it. This is also seeded in addition to providing wildlife habitat. Cover crop increases soil organic material, increases water infiltration, attracts beneficial insects that can assist landowners to do an IPM type of approach. But the practice that we commonly try to get people to do it first, if they're not interested in structures, is hedgerow planting. Hedgerow planting, as Ames talking about, can take up a very small little space, okay? And it's a great spot. You can come in and put in 100 feet of it. This right here was a demonstration site that I planted, and I worked with Jessica Cruz of Nrcs on this. 60-foot long, this was our first step of a 200-foot long hedgerow. We tried 4 different types of irrigation approaches. And what we did is you can see on the left, it's 6-foot spacing of these little shrubs. This is only 2.5 months after we planted this, back in 2009. But what I did is I'd use a drop fertilized spreader and we planted seed of these forbs and then just raked over the top of it. The picture on the right is the same spot, just from the different viewpoint. It's now facing west instead of facing east. And this is what happens when it grows in. It can be rather thick. Here are 2 other hedgerows. The one here, these are both in Yolo County. The one on the left, or on my left, the one with the smaller shrub, once again, spaced 6 foot apart. And it looks like, when you first put them in, not going to be much. Well, what happens later on, this is another project that went also back in 2011. And I actually thought it was placed a little too close together. These were 4 to 5 feet apart, 2 rows. But it's done incredibly well. But the key thing is if you ever come out and take a look at these projects, and I always encourage folks when they're going to properties and looking, try to put plants in that are going to survive once the landowner has stopped irrigating. Most landowners will not irrigate past year 3. And so it's a great, you learn from it. It's a small subset of the plants that would work there, but it's a great plant. How are we doing on time, Shelley?
We have about maybe 3 minutes before.
Okay,
I don't see any questions left. So you might be able to use that other 5 minutes.
So basically here, this is kind of a busy sheet, but you can look at it later because I know this is going to be recorded, but there are criteria that both the landowner, or excuse me, the land and whoever the cooperator is have to meet. And basically our payments typically cover for wildlife practices about 75% of the actual cost. There are a number of different conservation programs. The main one we're looking at is EQIP, Environmental Quality Incentives Program. And then this year and last year, we've had basically the same batching periods. We accept applications all year long, but we have these batching periods that you have to actually have your application be submitted, have us rank those, have us evaluate, rank them, and then we all have to get these funded by the end of September. So if you would like to get more information about us, you can go to our website. I think Shelley's already posted the link, that first link there, in terms of you can contact us there. You can contact me at this email address. I'm working remotely, so calling me, I didn't put my phone number up there. Or there's an office locator, and that office locator can be applied in NRCS, but you can also change it a little bit so that for those of you in other states, that you can find out where the local field office is, make your connection with them. And like I said, anything you talk to them about is private between you and them. So it's a great opportunity to start to work with the federal government in a way that your information is protected. And that's all about I have.
Great. Thank you so much, Tom. That was really great. There was one question that someone had for you, had posted already, is do your programs include community gardens and composting programs?
That's a good question. The community gardens typically, and we're always under the direction of the Farm Bill, which is what Congress passes, and we've moved to to where eligibility, and that's why I would check on the eligibility. It has to be something that actually has the ability to produce, and oftentimes it sells something for a certain value. So it's like $1,000 or something like that. So on that there, I would probably check with the local field office. In terms of composting, we don't pay to facilitate a composting program, but if I understand the question, we do have a composting practice where we'll we do have actually a composting practice which will pay to put compost on I believe it's croplands. Right now there's been a big push to start doing it more on rangelands, and I'm not sure exactly what the status of that is right there. But if this person wanted to follow up with me, I can get you more information later on about a better answer on that.